those who don't know me, my name is Siraj, and I've been teaching econ for quite some time now, and I've been doing some workshops every now and then to help students get through their exams, especially at the last moment, like right now. Hopefully, this workshop will touch enough topics that you'll be able to pass this exam, if not score an A for this exam, even if you've felt like you haven't studied as much. So let's take a look, because I'm going to give you some of the resources that you can use last minute, even at this moment, given that there's just about 30 days to go for your exam. Here's something familiar. Here's your textbook. This is what we're trying to cover as much as we can. Now, note that your textbook does not give you the direct answers to the questions that are going to come in. So I'm going to show you some of the direct answers that are going to come in and what you can write for these questions. If you do notice, some sections are tough, some sections are easy. Off the lot, I feel like this is the one that we're going to spend the most time on. This section on labor markets is brand new, and the rest of them, well, not all that bad. If you need to understand, this is the technical bit that you need to try to draw some graphs with, but it's not that bad, can be managed. There are diagrams that you will need to know. Now, I will not be running through each and every one of these diagrams because I have already done a video that you can go through on YouTube covering every single one of these diagrams. So it's quite a lot of diagrams that you will need to go through. Up here, I've got a Jamboard, which I will be using just to do some extra drawings while I'm explaining something to you. So you can take a look at these. Feel free to take screenshots or do whatever you need. Have a little notebook if you must, so that you can make a few notes while I'm delivering this workshop. Now, in this section, there's a good 7, 8, 20 markers that can come just from just from chapter 1, 2, and 3. Quite a number of 20 markers that can show up. So we're going to take a look at those 20 markers, understand a few concepts before we can go on to the tough ones. Off we go. Your very first area that you'll need to know is private sector versus public sector. Know that there will be questions asking you for similarities and differences. Now, I'm assuming you already know what the private sector is and the public sector is. The private sector it's operated by individuals and firms, as opposed to the public sector, which is operated by the government. Now, listed here are private sector objectives: profit maximization, sales maximization, revenue maximization, brand image, growth, all these things that you see here. I've separated the 8th one out. That's the odd man out, because all of the others are looking at money, profits, some personal gain. This is not. 8 is looking at the needs of society. You get some organizations that do this, the Red Cross or Embark if you're in Sri Lanka. So things like this are just objectives. You see how I've drawn an arrow across to say these are similar to the public sector objectives. And these are what the public sectors want. People's needs: healthcare, education, housing, security needs of the country, defense, law and order, providing a service to the country, maybe public transport, maybe the macroeconomic objectives. Now, these are all for society. That being said, it's similar to the 8th objective of the private sector that I've listed here. And you'd see the 5th one is also separated from the rest, because the 5th objective of the public sector is sometimes public sector firms are commercially driven. Sometimes they need to make sure that they're enough so that they will be able to continue running. Take, for example, the water board or the electricity board, because they will need to have enough money to continue operating, else they will not be able to survive. So it's very similar to a profit objective. So you are going to get a 20 marker asking you for the similarities and differences between the public sector objectives and the private sector objectives. In that sense, First, you need to show the key differences, saying this is profit-oriented and this is social-oriented. And then you say, however, look, there are some similarities here. And even for commercially driven, there are some similarities. That's how you handle a question like that. I'll show you a little more when it comes to this question. A little extra information that's put here are the types of organizations. Of course, these are some things that you should already know from the previous chapters. A few other definitions taken off your textbook, which is not for profit, state-owned organizations and such. And the different types of cooperatives, consumer cooperative, producer cooperative, and worker cooperative, all of which you have a little definition for yourself. Here's a question that came up June 2018, question 5B. This is from your past papers that said, discuss the extent to which the business objectives of a firm such as Australia Post may differ from those of a large private sector company. So see the differences listed, then the similarities listed, and then a little conclusion. So just as I showed you the structure before, here's some information that you can go through. Now, I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but some of them you can take a look at, and you have your key differences and similarities, and you can make comparisons and you can start to. Now here, this is of course applied to a postal company. So we've used things like DHL, Australia Post and whatnot, FedEx, TNT. So those are all application points that you can use. But here's your question on how you're going to get it. That's question number 1 of the 20 markers, or a larger question. We'll put that out of the way. Here's another one. So the previous one was a 12 marker. This is a 20 marker. Business objectives vary greatly depending on the type and ownership of a business organization. Again, they define the private sector, define the public sector, they give the different objectives, and then they go alongside and talk about the similarities. And you can also talk about the differences. So differences first and the similarities next, and then you can conclude your answer. That's 120 marker for you. The next area, of course, is the easiest area that you can come across. This is growth. Growth comes in a few forms, as you must have seen before as well. But I've divided it down. One is organic and the other one's inorganic. Now, there's different ways that people may term this: internal growth, external growth. Under external growth, they might call it mergers, acquisitions, takeovers. Any of that, joint ventures, strategic alliances, all come under inorganic growth. Organic growth, anything that you're growing from within the organization, your internal processes, your strategies, buying a new building, hiring more staff, getting new machinery, any of that goes under organic. Inorganic, on the other hand, is, well, there are 3 types, 4 types really. One is horizontal. You can see I've drawn a horizontal line here. Same industry, same stage of production. In Sri Lanka, we had a telecommunication giant take over another telecommunication giant. So Hutch taking over Edexcel. They're in the same industry, same stage of production as well. Horizontal integration. Vertical, on the other hand, you've seen I've drawn a vertical line here. They're in the same industry, but the stage of production is different. Maybe the previous stage or the forward stage. For example, a car manufacturer can take over a steel manufacturer. That's called vertical backward, because same industry, different stage of production. Or vertical forward can be a car manufacturer taking over a retail outlet, a car sales outlet. That's a forward stage of production. So backward, forward, vertical integration. There's 3 types covered right there. And then conglomerate. This is a different industry, possibly even a different stage of production. Maybe Reliance taking over Apple. Now, this is not a real example, but then just hypothetically, a conglomerate. This is conglomerate integration. So this one will ask you, okay, 2 ways questions will come here. One is the easy way, organic versus inorganic. You get that question, jackpot. You can easily score all your marks with that. But sometimes they might give it to you within a case study and then ask you to analyze it. So then you got to analyze a case study, say, is it horizontal? Is it vertical? Is it conglomerate? And then you need to have separate benefits and drawbacks for each, all of which come in the next slide. So you can take a look here. Horizontal integration. Again, I'm going to pick up on a few because you have a lot to cover, but I'll leave this all for you guys so that you guys can take a look at it on your own time. Horizontal integration. The good thing about horizontal is you're eating up your competition, which means one less competitor now. You can gain economies of scale because you're growing larger. You get bigger market share and whatnot. Drawback though, rationalization. When you now put all your resources together, you have two branches. You don't need two branches, so you shut down one branch. You have to let go of staff. All of those redundancies and whatnot will reflect as bad publicity. You might even become a monopoly, which means you come under scrutiny and investigation by the competition authorities. So not very good. Vertical integration, well, good, because you now have one, the if you're going vertical forward first, you control your whole distribution channel. So vertical forward is all about distribution channel, promotions, pricing, good outlet, everything under your control. Problem is, because you are now controlling your distribution channel, you can block out all your competitors as well. You cannot supply them. But when you don't supply them, consumers will suspect some form of uncompetitive activity. Yep. And not just that, you specialize in one industry. Now you're going to go into distribution. Do you have the expertise? You're a manufacturer. What do you know about distribution? So lack of expertise. Vertical backward is now taking over the supply chain, suppliers. You can have certainty because you know the supplies are coming in. You can have good quality because you know you're building it for yourself. You can control your price, all of that. Back again, we can say, look, where do we have the experience to supply all of this? And because the supplier has a guaranteed customer, they know that you are going to buy it now. They'll become complacent, they'll become inefficient because they know for a fact that you're going to buy. There's no need to innovate and whatnot. You're stuck with that same supplier. It's yours. And finally, conglomerate. Well, you diversified. Ever heard of the phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket? Because if that one basket falls, all eggs break. So now you're spreading the eggs. Even if one basket falls, that's fine. The others are surviving. So diversification is good. You're spreading risk. And you're kind of building a good brand as well. Back again, we're using the same point. Where do we have the experience to handle so many different industries? Yep. And one more thing, you lose your core focus because you are focused on one industry and now you're focused on several industries. Now, are you losing your focus? Are you losing your that advantage that you had, that competitive advantage that you had? So little things here. Now, these are a few things that I've listed here. You can easily get a lot more. Just go onto Google and hit benefits and drawbacks of each type and just hit images. Someone ought to have put benefits and drawbacks of each of them if you want to know more. But there's enough and more that you can go through. And there's enough and more past papers that you can go through that are marking schemes with benefits and drawbacks. But here you go, just for you to understand what this is so you can understand the topic a little more. Off we go. We've got something called divorce of ownership from control. This is very apparent in a public limited company. I'll explain the concept, but I'm just telling you the context first. In a public limited company, shares are sold to the general public. Normally, shareholders don't care about what the business does. They just want to make a quick buck. Maybe they want to make some dividends. Maybe they want to make some higher capital gains from the share price increasing. They just want to buy and sell. They don't care about the business. They don't care about controlling the business. Though they are the owners. You buy one share, you may be one of the few 100,000 owners that are there. So one, you don't have control. Two, you don't want control. Two different things there. But what they're trying to say here in this question is there is a clear distinction here, a clear divorce here. The people who own the business cannot control the business. They're the shareholders. They have such small shares that they have no say in the business. And the people who run the business, who are the employees, They have control over the business, but they don't own the business. So the owners can't control. The people who control don't own. Doesn't seem fair that you own a business and can't control it. So question here says, how can this affect private sector organizations? So first we define a private sector organization and tell them there's something called for-profit organizations and not for-profit. We define divorce of ownership from control. Talk about how owners may be unaware of the objectives of the managers, how business owned by shareholders but controlled by directors and managers. So you can see here, control is by someone else, ownership is by someone else. Then they list down some private sector objectives. All this is knowledge, yet we still haven't gone on to analysis. All this is knowledge. Then comes the distinction. So you're going to say, yes, there is a divorce of ownership from control. There is a divorce of ownership. Why? Because shareholders want maximum profit. They want good returns. They want a rising share price. They want dividends. Managers, on the other hand, they don't want those. They want growth. They want to build a power base. They want satisfies there. So the more you grow, the more you invest money into building the organization. In the short term, your profits fall because you're still growing, bought a building or something. In the long term, you get more profits, but in the short term, there's a clear distinction. One wants profit, the other doesn't care about the profit. You can also go on along the lines of saying managers want bonuses. They want higher salaries, all of that. So you give higher salaries and more bonuses, the profits will fall. So again, a conflict between the two parties. Go ahead and say no day-to-day control for shareholders. Why? Because they don't even know what's happening. I can buy a share from John Keels or something else from Apple, say today. I can buy it right now. You think I have control of Apple? No, but am I an owner of Apple? Yes, I am. Many investors. So you got to know that most of these big investors are passive. Passive indicating that they do not want control. They do not want anything out of it. Most of these big investors are large institutional shareholders like insurance companies, pension funds. These pension funds, people have a lot of money. They take this money, as in the organizations, pension organizations, they have a lot of money. They take this money and they go and dump it into some firm that makes good returns. And then they pull the money back out once they make some good dividends. So they don't care about the running of the organization. They're passive. They just want to make some money and leave. You evaluate this by saying, no, there is no divorce of ownership from control. So few of the points I say here is that, look, shareholders also may prefer company growth because it's short term. They might say, okay, you know what, I might lose some profit in the short term, but I'll gain a lot more in the long term. And you're also going to say, normally, directors are shareholders. Elon Musk is a director. He's also the shareholder, largest shareholder and the director. So in that sense, there is no divorce of ownership. Both work, both are in the same objective there. Long run, though, you can argue that all parties, including the employees, directors, they all want high profits. Short term, they may look for something else, but in the long term, they look for higher profits. So there is no distinction. There is no divorce of ownership. Some organizations are not for profit. Some organizations have social objectives. In a social objective organization, normally the employees also focus on social objective, owners also focus on social objectives, which means there is no divorce of ownership from control. All focus on one objective. And in the recent past, there's something called shareholder activism. Nowadays, shareholders don't keep quiet. They all get together, gang up and say, you know what, block that big pay rise. We don't want to give him a pay rise. He doesn't deserve that. He's a CEO. You shouldn't be paying him so much. Now there is no distinction. There is no divorce. People are taking control. And you conclude this off by saying, you know what, give some managers some incentives. Give them some award scheme, share scheme. That way the managers will focus on gaining more profits to get some good return. And well, the owners also get higher profits at the same time. That's how you answer that question. These are all extracts from marking schemes, by the way, so you can see what we're doing. We're discussing a few questions here. Some knowledge on cooperatives. This was already there before, so you can read this on your own time. One other question that can come in is a demerger. Separation of one business into two or more independent businesses. So you had, this would apply in the case of the dissolution of a previous merger. So if you had a previous merger as well, this can separate. Demerger, you merge, you demerge. They might ask you a question on the impact of a business, on a business rather, and they might ask you a question on the impact of workers. So let's take a look at both. Sometimes you merge and you realize this is not working out, let's demerge, let's sell it off. There are loads of companies that bought and sold just like that. One company is like Kraft. Kraft used to grow through mergers, so they buy and sell companies. If they're not doing well, they just sell it off. Now, the benefit of the business is previously they may have experienced this economies of scale. Now, you need to know what this term is, but I will go through this term a few slides down the line. Previously, you may have had inefficiencies. Now you have greater efficiency. Previously, you may have been making losses. Now you sold it off, you're making your profits. You have more funds now. You sold it off. You can invest it in R&D or you can pay off your debts. You were almost becoming, you're growing so large, you were almost becoming a monopoly. Now you sold it off, part of it. So now competition authorities will not come and intervene. Normally, when you become a monopoly, a lot of competition authorities come and intervene and they snoop through everything. They scrutinize everything. Chances are you have done something wrong in the past and swept it under the carpet. Every business has something to hide. You get caught and, well, loads of fines and disreputation and disrepute and whatnot. Now that you sold that organization off, you demerge, you can focus on your core business. And not just that, since you're focusing on your core, one key thing is that your workers are now specialized and they can gain efficiency also. And no more culture clash. You merged, there must have been a clash in cultures. Now no longer. The culture is no longer clashing because you have sold that part of the business. But there are drawbacks. You raise funds. You said, yeah, you raise funds here. You can invest in R&D or pay off debts. But if you use that money to pay off your debts, it's a very short-term thing. Yeah, which means that what a waste. You sold an entire business just to pay off your debts. Not so great. What if you sold off the business and the new management is running it so well? Now you start to regret the decision because you'll be like, I could have done a better job. I could have done it. I could have earned that money. Or you could have even been like, you know what? Why did I sell it so cheap? It's doing so well now. Next thing, the business may experience a rise in LRAC, which means that now you sold off so much that you don't have economies of scale anymore. Economies of scale was there due to a large amount of production. Now it's not there anymore. Now it's much less. One more thing. What happens after you demerge? There are legal fees, there are redundancy costs, there are dispute settlements, there are IT systems required, all of that. What is the cost of the demerger outweigh the benefits of the demerger? More points here indicate that you can say now you're smaller, so you won't get as much sources of finance as you used to get. If you specialize and get staff to be specialized, they will leave the organization. Boredom, all that. You learn division of labor and specialization, the drawbacks of that. And fall in market power because now you were large before, now you're no longer large. Market power will fall. These are your impacts on the business. But then again, what about the workforce? When you demerge, there's greater job security because the previous merger experienced inefficiencies, diseconomies of scale, possibly shut down, a vibe of shutting down. Now no longer. Now you know what, my job is stable. More job opportunities because now you need specialist staff for this particular business. You can get more job opportunities there. Pay rises because now if you are now finding it difficult to recruit staff because you're now smaller, You'll pay the existing staff higher so that they work better and then they handle the business. Working for a smaller business may be more motivating. Why? Better communication, fewer layers of management, more motivation in every sense. And if you are more focused in a business, and you will get specialist training, you will get an improvement in your skills. You'll be specialized basically. You'll be more employable. You can find a job almost anywhere. Here are the drawbacks though. Demergers normally lead to rationalization. There's some form of job losses there. Workers may feel less secure because they know it's unstable at some point. It's demerging. They'll be demotivated. They'll feel like they're going to lose their jobs. Lack of benefits, because earlier your organization was so large, you can give them bonuses, you can give them share schemes, all of that. Now, no longer. And if you say you're going to be specialized, you're going to be repeating the same task on and on and on. Division of labor drawbacks again. It'll become monotonous. It'll be really difficult on you and you might leave. Fewer opportunities for promotion as business is smaller now. That earlier you had a long ladder that you can climb up. No longer anymore. Organization is smaller. So here are your impacts on workers, the benefits, and your drawbacks of the demerger. So this is how a question can come in. Either it can ask you for both together, then you only need to know 2 points of each, or they can ask you a separated one, then you need to know at least 4 points of each. Economies of scale. These are concepts that you have learned before in the previous units, but I will take you through this now. This is your cost curve, your average cost curve. Economies of scale will indicate that as you produce more, your average cost will start to fall. Average cost is the cost per unit. It will start to fall. Why will it start to fall? These reasons. When you grow large, in other sense, you're producing more, you're growing larger, you can buy in bulk, you get purchasing economies of scale, you get discounts. You can get manager economies because now people are specialized, you get specialist managers to hire to manage the staff, manage the production. Technical economies or even technological economies, you can introduce capital into the business, things get cheaper. Risk bearing, because you can spread your risk. Financial economies, you can negotiate. Interest rates with large financial institutions. You can go to them, take a loan, and say, you know what, I want to pay much less as interest because I'm large and I'm going to take a large loan. So give it to me for cheaper. And marketing economies, because now you can spread advertising and the marketing budget very well, because sometimes these costs are fixed. So maybe a billboard cost can be spread over all the different types of output that you're making. So the cost of the billboard, that is cost per unit for the billboard, is much cheaper. That's economies of scale. Note that these are internal economies of scale. These are because you are growing. Internal indicates that because you are growing, the cost falls. As opposed to external, which we'll touch later. Now you have this economies of scale because you're growing too large. The cost starts to rise, average cost starts to rise. These are the ones in blue are some internal diseconomies of scale. I'd like to call these 3 C's and a B, and we can add demotivation to that. Control, coordination, communication, bureaucracy, and demotivation. These 5 things can happen. You lose control, your coordination suffers, communication suffers, because you're growing too large here, yeah? Bureaucracy indicates a lot of paperwork, a lot of administration, all of that. And finally, demotivation, because, well, workers will feel like, you know what, I'm so far away from the owner, the managers. People don't even know my name. Demotivation, grown too large. Now we can come to external economies of scale. Your average costs are falling, just like before, but not because you are growing. This is because the industry is growing. Maybe there's more skilled labor coming to the area. Maybe there's better infrastructure. Maybe the suppliers are moving closer. Maybe you're sharing your knowledge. All this will make your average cost fall. And get this, you did not grow. You're in the same place. You did not increase output. You're in the same place. Then you get external diseconomies of scale. We saw external economies, invert these factors and you get external diseconomies like skilled labor leaving, infrastructure getting worse off and not being maintained, suppliers leaving the area, any of that can cause your costs to start to rise. This is the concept of economies and diseconomies of scale. Note that external economies of scale is not this diagram. This diagram shows a movement along the line. Here, there's a shift in the curve. There's a shift in the curve because at this point, at output of 10, you're not increasing your output, yet the costs have fallen because the industry grew. Yeah, you didn't grow, the industry grew, the costs have fallen. Now, same diagrams, so you can take a look at that. Sizes of businesses are another area that you can get a question on. This, of course, the question will be along the lines of no firm should stay small because there's so much benefits to growing. So your argument is say you must grow. Your counter argument must say, look, you must not grow or you are unable to grow. So on the left, you see some reasons why firms stay small. They don't have the money. One is they can't grow. One is they don't want to grow. Can't grow, they don't have the money. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the management, nothing. Won't grow is different. They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to get diseconomies of scale. Yeah. Maybe it's a lifestyle business. If you learn business in unit 1 or 2, you learn what lifestyle businesses are. These are things that people just make around their lifestyle, just to sustain that form of lifestyle. They don't want to grow too large. And sometimes small firms are monopolists. You can give them personal service and charge higher prices. Yeah. So some firms may remain small as opposed to this. Now look at the question here. They say benefits to growth are so great that you shouldn't remain small. So you argue for growth, economies of scale. You can discuss all the different types of economies of scale that we just discussed and say costs will fall, so profits will rise. You can talk about market share, market power, diversification, behavioral motives. Sometimes you want to build an empire. You want to build your own empire because you know that, well, I have so many organizations under my name now. Or maybe you want to achieve some sort of monopoly power. Monopoly power is control over suppliers. You evaluate. These are your evaluations. You can put them here. You have to say these are the reasons why firm may stay small. That's another question for you. Again, another 20 marker that can come in. And finally, constraints on business growth. Now, I'm going to show you a question before I can show you something else. A question can come on several constraints. Okay. Look at the parts in green here. Finance can constrain your business. Cost of finance can constrain your business. Interest rates, size of the market, bureaucracy, red tape, managerial skills, competition, objectives. All of these can constrain your business. When I say constrain, you cannot grow your business. All of these, you will not be able to grow your business. Yeah, it constrains your business. But I'm not going to select all of this because in your syllabus, this is something extracted from your syllabus. The constraints on business growth have only selected 4. Okay. Since they've selected 4, let's study only 4 instead of studying all of the things there. Yeah. Now, a little extraction from your textbook. These are some things that you can know. So size of the market, because sometimes, guys, market sizes are small. You can't sell as much. Yeah. If you're in a village, maybe just the nature of the business, you can't sell that much. You're restricted by the number of customers or the number of times people buy things, maybe small. I once tried to sell some graphic design tablets, the things that designers use to draw on. And I realized the percentage of designers here in this country is just 1-2%. And when you buy one device, you'll probably buy it only once. You're not going to buy another one for the next 3-4 years. So where's my potential to sell all that? I can't sell it. Size of the market is small. The nature of the business is such. Nature of the product is such. Access to finance, obviously, access to finance can be a big problem because you can't get the finance you need to grow because you're small, or you have some sort of disreputation or something or the other, you'll not be able to get. You can't sell shares if you're a small business, neither can you gain any form of loans. Yeah. Regulation is the third one. Sometimes you can't, the European Union, for example, they prohibit mergers and takeovers. Okay. That means that they don't allow you to grow. Yeah. And they kind of have loads of regulations for a larger business, monopolies and all that. So they kind of regulate your growth. There's a reason why the government does not like you growing. They feel like you'll exploit customers and you won't let competition prosper. They want competition. They want more innovative stuff. So they want competition to prosper. But if you're growing and become a monopoly, then that won't happen. That's why they stop you from doing it. Fourth one, owner's objectives. Not every owner wants to grow. They may be happy with where they are. They don't want the extra work. It's a lifestyle business. So we saw the reasons why business stays small. Some of these reasons, owner's objective. Here are your constraints on the growth. Now, under each of this, now this is a bit of a flag question. When I say flag question, I mean they might say the size of the market is a major constraint of the business. Do you agree? Then you have to only talk about this in the forward argument. In your analysis, you should only talk about one. In the evaluation, you can say, however, there are other things and you can speak about these things. But you need to have at least 3 points for your forward argument, saying size of the market. So here you have a few points, more than 3. Market is small. It's localized market. It's a niche market. That's why the size of the market is small. Consumer demand is not growing. It's static. Market may be shrinking. For example, beverage market like Coca-Cola, people don't want these fizzy beverages anymore. They're shifting to more nutritious drinks. So maybe the market is shrinking. Yeah. Maybe too many firms are playing in. Maybe too many entrants are coming in. All of these you can point out to say size in the market. So pick these few points and start writing. Then you have you say, however, and you say limited access to finance. Now in this also you have 3 points here. Owner's objectives also you have a few points here. Yeah. So extract from these and start learning these points. Okay. Maybe not enough of retained profits. Maybe banking sector is fragmented, not willing to lend. Maybe it's difficult for small firms to get finance, any of that. Owner may be satisfied with it. Growth is risky. It's time consuming. It's expensive. They don't have the skills. Any of this can go under owner's objectives. Find 3 points for the forward arguments for each one of these 4. Your evaluation, you can just talk about the other factors. Or you can evaluate your own factor to say size of the market may not be a major issue, may not be a major constraint. Why the market is growing? Maybe it's small now, but it's growing later. Maybe you can expand the business through advertising. Maybe you can diversify into other markets. And then you can go with other constraints. So the general way out is to say, however, this is significant, size of the market is significant. However, there are other factors and you can state the other factors. The key thing you need to learn is points for your forward argument. Enough and more information here that you can start to extract a few points. Okay, off we go to, so as you can see, guys, all of which that I just did are only these 3 sections, these 3 topics. I haven't even gone to all the other slides yet. That's how many 20 markers can come from the first section. Now let's move on to the next. Here you notice there's revenue and cost. How do you find total revenue? Price into quantity. How do you find total cost? Variable cost plus fixed cost. But that's not what we want. In Unit 3, we want 2 other types of revenue and 2 other types of cost. We don't want total revenue. We want average revenue and marginal revenue. We want average cost and marginal cost. Now pay close attention to this section because you mess this up, you mess the rest of Unit 3 up. The rest of Unit 3 are based on these curves, are based on these concepts. Average revenue is the revenue per unit. Okay, in other words, average revenue is the demand curve. AR is equal to D, because average revenue demand, same meaning, revenue per unit. How do you find that? Total revenue divided by output. Note that the AR curve or the demand curve is downward sloping as usual. There are scenarios where the AR curve may be flat. It's flat here. Yeah, we'll come to that. For now, let's take the AR curve as a downward sloping curve. The marginal revenue, on the other hand, is a change in the total revenue. Okay, marginal means additional. Okay, so the revenue that you get from each additional unit sold, you sell one more unit, how much revenue are you getting? Okay, you calculate this by change in total revenue over change in output. So the marginal revenue will look like that. Right below the demand curve, it will slide downwards. Can someone just confirm to me if you can see my drawings on the screen? The MR line, just a raise of hands would do. Okay, great. Thank you. So the MR line is slightly below the AR line. That's how it looks. In a flat scenario, AR and MR are on the same line. It won't change. We'll look at that later. Yeah, let's look at the downward sloping for now. Cost curves don't have complications. Cost curves, you need to know, just like we learned average revenue, now we're learning average cost. Average cost, again, the cost per unit, total cost divided by the output. Okay, we saw this average cost curve already. Where did we see it? I'm going to go back the slides a bit. There you go. Economies of scale and diseconomies of scale. Average cost curve. A U-shaped curve. Yeah. And it's U-shaped because of the concept of economies of scale and diseconomies of scale. Marginal cost, on the other hand, looks like a little tick. There we go. A little tick. Yeah. There's only one rule to this. We'll try to look at the rule a little later, but keep in mind that if you ever draw a marginal cost curve, it has to go through the lowest point of the AC curve. You have the average cost curve. The marginal cost curve must go through the lowest point of the average cost curve. Now, marginal cost is cost of each additional unit. Average cost, cost per unit. Marginal revenue, revenue from each additional unit. Average revenue, revenue per unit. Now, moving on. Look carefully here. I'll explain this. You have AR curve downward sloping, MR curve downward sloping, U-shaped curve, and a tick. You put this all together, it'll look like this. AR is here, MR is here. AR and MR. AC is here, the U-shaped curve. My drawing's a little ugly, but it's a U-shaped curve. And MC is right there. Cuts through the lowest point of the AC curve. Okay. You need to learn your holy grail of Unit 3. And you do not forget this no matter what. MR equals MC. This will haunt you for the rest of the unit, but you keep this in mind. MR equals MC. This is the point where you get the maximum profit. Now, where you get the maximum profit is where your marginal revenue is equal to your marginal cost. Now, I'm not going to take you through the concept, lack of time here. So I'm just going to say, keep this in mind. So all businesses or majority of the businesses will want the highest profit maximization. Yeah. With that being said, where the marginal revenue here cuts the marginal cost here, this point over here, this point. Now you see this quantity. Find the quantity here. Find the quantity there. At that quantity is where you're going to produce, for example, 10,000. At this quantity, Go and see where it touches the AR curve. And at this quantity, go and see where it touches the AC curve. The AR curve and the AC curve. AR curve will show you your revenue, for example, 100 million. AC curve will show you your cost, which is, for example, 80 million. This thing in between becomes your, what we call, supernormal profit, SNP. I'll use the words SNP from now onwards. You get your supernormal profits. That is the main diagram through the syllabus, the profit maximization diagram. Yeah. Supernormal profit, abnormal profit, whatever you want to call it. Okay. There are other objectives though. Some of the other objectives are slightly less important objectives though. Revenue maximization and sales maximization. Revenue maximization occurs where MR is equal to 0. So see here, where the MR line touches the axis, it's equal to 0. At this point, go and see where it touches your AR, go and see where it touches your AC, and try to see if there are any profits there. We're not focusing on our profits. What we're trying to say is that at this point, we make the highest revenue. The previous one I told you we're making the highest profit. Here we're making the highest revenue. The third point, though, is the highest sales. Now, some people ask me, what's the difference between revenue and sales? Revenue is the dollar value, how much you can get. Sales, on the other hand, is the unit value, how many units you can sell. So, sales maximization is where AR equals AC. Average revenue is equal to average cost. Note that the diagram is all the same, just different points of production. If I draw it in the same diagram, here is where MR equals MC, profit maximization. I'm going to extend this curve a bit here. Here is where revenue maximization is, where MR equals 0. And AR equals AC, here is where sales maximization is. So same diagram, just different points of production. Profit maximization, revenue maximization, sales maximization. Of all, the most important is profit maximization. So if you don't know these points now, write them down or memorize them. Profit max, MR equals MC. Revenue max, MR equals 0. Sales maximization, AR equals AC. And there you have it, the core to the rest of your chapters. Now, we're going to take a look at a few other things here. We drew the revenue and the cost curves together. Here's a table where I explain to you some cost curves and some diagrams along cost. Okay. Cost. Let me explain the table to you first. You've got capital. We're going to assume that capital is fixed because normally we're learning the short run concepts here. In the short run, guys, you can't change your capital. Capital will be fixed. Okay. There is no you have land, for example. That's your major capital, your major tractors and whatnot for a farmer. You can't keep changing it. Short run. Labor is a variable input. You can keep adding labor. Add. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Little footnote here. Assume that capital cost is $100 per unit and labor cost is $200 per unit as an example. Okay. So you can notice here each labor how much they make. You put 1 labor 20, 2 labors 54, 3 labors 100, 4 labors 150, and so on and so forth. But I want to check the marginal output, guys. That means for each additional worker, how much they're making.